Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on music with our beloved Holger. So we'll pick up from last time, and I'd like to ask you about some modern compositions, or fairly modern, like Schoenberg.
Yes. You say it already fairly modern. We know it's 120 years ago.
I know.
So that's a couple of generations.
Yeah.
It is seen from today closer to Beethoven than to us.
Then?
Than to us.
Yes,
today.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, Beethoven and Schoenberg were much closer together in time than we and Schoenberg.
True.
So we can safely put this into the box classical music.
And Berg also?
Yeah, of course.
Berg also.
Yes. Okay, yes. When we listen to Berg, we hear especially romantic music.
Yes.
Right? He was, by the book, 12-tone musician. But by the heart, he was completely romantic, I feel. That's why Berg sounds so different than von Webern.
Yeah, yes.
Yes. To me, at least. Yeah.
There were a couple of composers that attributed all of their music to the influence of Sri Aurobindo. And I think you know both of them.
Yes.
But can we begin with the first one before Scelsi?
So there are only rare experiences where I could experience Stockhausen's music as from the heart. Not so often I could. Most of them I found valuable and interesting experiments. Luckily, I had a very, very good pianist coming to Auroville 25 years ago, and he was specialist for Stockhausen. Frank Gutschmidt, his name. Wonderful musician. And he played Zodiac on the piano by heart. He knows almost everything by Stockhausen for piano by heart. And a lot of other music also. And then I was there and I said, oh, that's actually really good music. So then I could feel it. But the next step where I would start to say, yes, I have this and this and this experiences as a professional musician is when I have played it. Yeah. So in terms of orchestral music, where did I sit in the orchestra? Yeah. So I played Haydn in the orchestra. I played Symphonie Fantastique by Berlioz. Then this experience became quite different. So I did not play Stockhausen. I planned always, but it never happened because, you need a couple of months of dedicated work to play that good. As you saw with your bass, that you said, no, that's too complicated. Now, if you're ambitious, then you have to sit and learn these different rhythms and complicated and don't hear this interval and don't hear that. So you learn it. And in my case, with a lot, I'm not too gifted. So it does take a lot of work to learn this.
Yes, it does.
So in that sense, I would not want to judge. Anyway, I don't want to judge, but
Stockhausen.
I don't know so much about that, But I know enough to say this is a very serious man. He's a very serious composer. And I know that his son, who is a jazz trumpeter, was never accepted by his daddy because he was genuine, just playing around stuff. Stockhausen seems to have been a very, very avid controller of everything, including his personal relationships. So he would know exactly the length and volume, not only the pitch, exactly of every note in all his compositions. And if somebody would not perform it that way, he was...
So he would notate everything?
Everything. There is zero freedom in, you play what you feel. This is just, which we still have in a lot of Baroque music. It's more or less this. This is where music comes from. Notation was going more and more and more and more detailed. And I think it also culminated in after the 12-tone music and the serial music into something where we say we cannot go on like this, because we are actually, with this lack of spontaneity, we are killing actually the music itself.
Did you find it was a kind of ivory tower?
Yes, that is where this comes so often. Yes. And understandably, I would say. So then came new, including the second one we mentioned here, Scelsi.
Scelsi, yes.
So he was, in the later part of his work, he was only improvising.
I studied him quite a bit. I read all the writings about him.
Yes.
Which are always extremely positive. But I could not get into his music that deeply for some reason.
Is it too dark for you?
I thought it was.
Yes, exactly. So that's a personal liking of yours. He did not, with all his subjective inspiration on Sri Aurobindo, he did not catch that part of the light which we would see in the Book of Love in Savitri. He wouldn't compose that one. He would choose other parts, the descent into the night. Give it to Scelsi, it's a no-brainer.
I see.
And you have to... Fascinating. Very good.
Very good, yes, very
So then he sits well there, and if you like that, or can at least, without flinching, go down with him, it is fascinating. He's very good.
He created many new instruments also. And those have some interest to me. But peripheral mostly. Yeah. But of the very latest composers, let's say year 2000 and above, who have you heard that you feel has received something of a descent either through the head or through the heart?
Brad Meldau, a jazz pianist. For me, for most of the life, I was more an improvising artist. As you know, I studied classical music, but I was mostly fascinated by the creation on the spot. And for that, I have more knowledge about great jazz musicians. And as music history progresses, it's not those great jazz musicians like Louis Armstrong or Oscar Peterson or so, which is amazing what they could do. But in terms of free creation, it is quite limited, right? Because they are very freely creating, but within a very defined box, and within that, unbelievable skill technically, but also in terms of flow. I mean, Oscar Peterson can play half an hour on a chord progression of 16 bars, and every time it's something new coming up. But then again, it's also this 16-bar box in which everything happens.
Right.
But as music history progresses, the jazz also progressed into more possibilities than this.
Well, you did a lot of it. Perhaps you can tell us some of your Life's
sure. Then we saw like basically we can say when we study the Western classical music, everything that took roughly 80 years took in the jazz about a decade. So it's the same process if you look at the triad or the chord-oriented simple progressions. Ba, bi, ba, ba-ba-dim, ba-ba-dum, dim, dum, da-da-dum, and here we go. That's triad music. And ba, bi, da, dum, bi-da-dum. 100 years later, Mozart, the same triad.
Yes.
Okay, fine. The one is C major, the other one is E major, but that's about it. So this is how jazz also started. Ba-dee-dum-bum, ba-bee-ba-bum, ba-dee-ba-bum, bum-bum-bum-ba. The same like Sonata Facile.
Saints come marching in.
This is more or less all the same. But then when you go for Beethoven and Schumann, and then it gets more and more, and then romantic music, and then towards 12-tone music. This development you can observe in jazz also. So in 1900 to 1920, it was the same like Baroque and even before.
Well, I remember in New Orleans, I used to go and listen to them all the time, the old timers.
Exactly. So this is triad music. If you have a seventh in the chord, it'll be the dominant seven, but that's about it. Not even a major seven on the tonic. Tonic is a triad, not a seventh chord. Quite interesting. And then it develops. So when the 12-tone music was reached in beginning of the 20th century, that's when the jazz started. But it didn't start at the 12-tone music. It started 600, 400 years before.
Yes.
And then it went the same embryonal states that are necessary to evolve another time. But because all those jazz musicians had already the influence of the other, they could buy recordings and so on. We know that Ellington was a big fan of Debussy, Duke Ellington. He liked to listen to Debussy, but that was already much later, but still very harmonic. Okay, there were new scales coming in, whole tone scale and so on, but still not towards 12-tone music. So Ellington was in this phase. So every decade you see the jazz repeating the Western classical.
Not evolving though.
Evolving,
or would
yes.
you say evolving also?
Yes, because it's a parallel thing. So I'm saying this evolution is done a second time in jazz, and necessarily in the same way. Not because somebody ordered that, not because you had to, but because it is inbuilt. You learn from the triad, you learn towards the 7 chords, you introduce a 9 later. You don't start with this. That's the simple chord knowledge here. And therefore, we could ask, so when is 12-tone music reached? Well, in jazz, it's called free jazz. And it was in the 60s. And same thing, like when you say modal jazz, then that would be Boulez. When you go linear on a scale and so on. These kind of things. There are all a lot of music historical similarities. And the Western so-called classical music, I did not observe, except the minimal music. I did not observe as closely, because I found it very tedious. Once I had a string quartet, and we had the possibility to play a string quartet of Hans-Jürgen von Bose, and mostly, I think, known as an opera composer, 20 years older than us, or so. And we got well paid because Edition Peters said we have to, promote that guy. So we played as a string quartet of his, and we got 20 paid rehearsals.
20
paid rehearsals.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was pretty good, because then we had time, we could meet, we could study what he has been writing there. And it was partly for us not understandable. We were not exactly experts because we were improvising string quartet. But it was okay. We did our job. And there was a section where the rhythm was, to our experience, completely erratic. We couldn't find anything. It was very difficult, and we got fed up. And then we said, basically, it's like this. And then we did what we think it should be. And after 10 rehearsals, Mr. Bose came down to Munich and listened to our rehearsal. And we played it not what was written. We played it the way we think what it is. And he was so liking it. He says, you guys get it. You know, I wrote something that nobody can read, so that the normal classical musicians get so irritated that they play some chaos. And we said, yeah, well, we can play chaos directly. We don't have to look at notation. And he liked it. So this also exists. But as a proper classical composer, you cannot, at that time, you cannot easily write to the people, produce some chaos as some crazy Morse code people on acid. You cannot write it in the score. Nobody buys that score. But it worked out.
But today, unfortunately, Muzak and other systems of music, which are meaningless but attempt to what? To calm people in an elevator? Or what would you
Calming
say?
Or also vitalizing.
Or
the opposite
vitalizing
is also important, because you shall go shopping and get more, so the vital should be,
Mm-hmm.
We just had the experience. We were in Mother's room, and there were like down to the road a lot of people, and we walked. Nobody spoke. Easily, friendly silence, wonderful. We walked through the room. We walked down. Then we have breakfast, and we hear boom, zack, kadum, dum, zack, and it's a pain. So it's not. I have been doing such music. I have no problem with rock music as such, but it must be the right thing at the right place. So it must be at the place. Then a living musician will do the thing in accordance to the place. So I don't want, Muzak is for me, in this case, it was the pop music, what we heard for breakfast. But in other places, it's some nice shruti box and sitar doing and so on. It's also Muzak. It's out of place.
Can you speak a little bit about rhythm in the West and in India and the differences? Because there are tremendous musicians here playing tabla that are extraordinary.
Absolutely. Already for Western, the average tabla player is extraordinary. They have such an education. It's wonderful. The whole Carnatic system of understanding rhythm is far advanced compared to what is rhythmically going on in Europe, for the most part. Which is very understandable. My theory is because the development of the harmonic system, which took the West, say, 800 years of continuous work of incredible geniuses, one after the other. Each one contributes, we can do it like this, we can do this one new, now let's try that, and so on. So this takes a lot of creative power of very good people, focusing on harmony.
And polyphony, to some extent.
To some extent, then therefore
But not rhythm so
but
much.
Because there is all the creative force, the rhythm rather gets poorer than richer. So even if they would have had contact with a tabla player, they say like, yeah, but where are you going? You know, to express what you want to express from the soul, your primary tool will be first melody and then harmony in the West. So the rhythm gets poorer and poorer. Even the intricacies of the raga system, which is really fantastic and fascinating, got lost in the West. We have a few scales and that's it. What is so nice, the grammar in the raga music is partly to start with, the different way you go up, then you go down, right? That is what raga music makes it different than you would do in the West.
Would you say with a lot of improvisation on the way?
That is independent, whether you improvise it or not.
Okay.
It's a rule of feeling. And
so there's a raga for this and a raga for that. That's a fixed raga. For sunrise raga.
Yeah, all ragas are fixed in that sense.
Exactly,
no?
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So they have, what I'm saying here is that alone to have a scale going up different than down. There is only one scale in Western classical, and even that is abandoned in jazz. That's the melodic minor, no? Mm-hmm. Where you go ba 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 bum. So up you have a high 6 and a high 7, and down you have a low 7 and a low 6.
Mm-hmm.
That is with lots of ragas the case. So this knowledge got either not discovered or lost on the way. We do know that the Western music got quite a bit from Greek, and we can assume that the Greek music got quite a bit from the Indian.
Yeah.
But these are assumptions. So the melodic got poorer and the rhythm got much poorer. Odd meters are totally the exception.
What are?
Odd meters, like not okay. The 3/4, of course, the waltz is odd.
Yes.
Bum, ding, dong, right. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. But all else, there is no 5. There is no 7. Ever.
Yes.
Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, you got
it has such a charm.
You got 6/8. You got 2/4.
You got 6/8, which is a 2, which is yatapa, yapapa, yapapa, yapapa. So
right.
Nothing to write home about.
Right.
And in terms of subdivision, the same. You have whole, quarter, you have 8th notes, 16th, and so on. Where do you write a quintuple or a septuple? And over the septuple, somebody else has to play 16th. That's all 20th century. Mozart didn't do anything like that. So the Carnatic music does that like for breakfast all the time. And it's wonderful.
Yes.
So different cultures have different, I would say, tasks. And the really admirable, fantastic task of the West was to develop harmony and harmonical progressions. Not just harmony. We could easily say why there is harmony in Bollywood music also. It's not that harmony we talk about. Yeah, it's not that something is nice or working nicely together.
And there were many good composers who composed specifically for Hollywood music, for Hollywood films.
Yes, true. But I was saying Bollywood now.
Oh, Bollywood. Oh, okay. Okay. Right.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. So the harmony is the great development of the West. And therefore, for example, the rhythm got not so much being taken care of. And in the African music, it's even more extreme in some way because of the relatively less mental concentration. The drumming of certain people in the truly African, not the North African, more like the Central African kind of drumming, they go a lot on this field of experience of music. Yeah? Whereas when you listen to Carnatic drumming, it's more like here. Yeah? If there were not the Mughal influence, I would say this part even would be not so much there. It's my feeling.
Very interesting.
I get rather touched here in North Indian music. And in South Indian music is more like here.
Very good.
Thank you.
Namaste. And thank you for attending.